While the president is out fear-mongering that local cops are going to lose their job, he is at the same time trying to pull away your right to self-defense. The federal government is debating gun control, and the states are starting to take drastic action on their own. In Washington state, lawmakers have proposed a new gun control bill that grants the sheriff the right to conduct an inspection to ensure compliance. Maryland now has banned gun shows indefinitely. New York has introduced a new bill that will require gun owners to have $1 million in liability insurance. Don't get it? Lose your privilege, not your right, to own a gun. Colorado Democratic Joe Salazar suggested that women use whistles and call boxes instead of guns to defend themselves from an attacker.
That's why we have safe zones. That's why we have the whistles, because you just don't know who you're going to be shooting at.
And yet another Colorado Democrat now thinks that the buddy system is the best way.
There are other methods. There's mace. What about a taser? The buddy system. Other methods at self-defense, judo or what have you.
Meanwhile, Joe Biden has another idea. Limit your shots to 2.
I said, Jill, if there's ever a problem, just walk out on the balcony here or walk out, put that double-barrel shotgun and fire 2 blasts outside the house. You don't need an AR-15. Buy a shotgun. Buy a shotgun.
Tonight, the war on guns. It's here. It's real, and it's just the beginning.
This is the Glenn Beck Program.
You know, if you really want to understand gun control, you have to ask yourself why. Why would they possibly be doing it? They're saying that they're doing it for the children, but here on the Blaze, if you go to the front page of the Blaze today, there's a couple of stories that have just been posted. One of them is a Columbine survivor that has penned the open letter to President Obama that just says, "Whose side are you on?" Certainly not the kids. And also the NRA has just put together a new ad reminding us they don't rule us, they don't give us rights, talking about the government. Find those stories at theblaze.com. There are these people in government that, I'm sorry, but I don't believe they're trying to help us. They believe in nudge, then shove, then shoot. They are trying to control us. The self-declared defenders of women, advising females to essentially duck and cover when they're physically attacked by violent rapists or murderers. I'm sorry, but when my daughter went off to college, I didn't tell her to take, judo. I didn't do that. She was fearing for her life. She was in danger. If she wasn't in New York, I would have told her to get a gun. And I would have taken her and trained her how to use it. In fact, I did. My mistake was I let her go to college in New York. And my other daughter is in college in New York. Problem. Just whistle, kids. Just whistle. Click your heels together 3 times and the intruder, the rapist, will magically run away. There was actually a story that we did on the radio yesterday, was it yesterday or today, that Colorado is now saying, and this is from the University of Colorado, that you should, if you're going to be raped, you should vomit on yourself or pee yourself, because that'll turn him off. Oh, so rape is about sex. I always thought it was about control. This is crazy. Yeah, just break out those fancy judo movies if you really want to be safe. Or hang out in a rape-free zone. Maybe if we just print rape-free zone on t-shirts for women, it'll all be great. Colorado has some of the craziest procedures, and they are doing all kinds of things now to their population. I am blown away by the overwhelming concern from progressives about Colorado. You'll find out why it's happening in Colorado tonight. And it's touching. It really is. It's almost as touching as when women were raped at Occupy Wall Street and they were told by progressives not to report it and just don't say anything to the police, just keep it quiet. The message of Occupy was more important than the victims of rape. The message of gun control is more important than women fighting off rapists. Ladies, do you feel the progressive love? This is the height of insanity, and it is all about one word: control. These far-reaching gun laws are now being thrown about in the states. Missouri had one. Colorado, it's their turn this week, and I believe it's the Overton window. Remember what the Overton window is? You take something down here, and you move it all the way down to the crazy end of the spectrum, and then when you move it halfway in between, it seems logical. They propose the craziest ideas, and then move that center line. So it makes everybody, gun right advocates will say, well, we're winning. I mean, we stopped them from taking all of the guns away. But we accept a little more gun regulation. It's a win for them. One step closer to the goal. The good news is that millions who support the right to bear arms are not taking it sitting down. Now, in Missouri, they're moving the Overton window, too. A lawmaker has proposed a bill that would send any lawmaker to prison if they proposed more gun control legislation. Move the Overton window. Thousands in New York have relentlessly protested the SAFE Act, passed by Cuomo on January 15th of this year. And in Ulster County, New York, legislature there passed a resolution 14-8 calling for a repeal of most of the state's newly enacted gun laws. This is not about common sense regulations, because there's no common sense there at all. We told you last night, and I haven't heard anyone report on it, that the kid that shot all of the kids in Connecticut was motivated by video games. It was reported on CBS one time, once. It was video games. He was living in a virtual world. He thought he was getting points for killing kids. Progressives don't like any guns. They banned machine guns, and then they changed the classification of assault rifle so they could go after semi-automatic rifles. Britain did exactly the same thing. They just chipped away, taking one type of gun at a time. And then a crazy person went on a killing spree with 2 pistols and 2 handguns, and they banned everything within a year. What possible reason is there to suggest that the Fabian socialists are different than our democratic socialists or our progressives here in America? With each passing legislation, we move one step closer to confiscation. Our best defense is something that the British didn't have at their disposal: the Second Amendment. Educate yourself. Know your rights. The Second Amendment right is very easy. A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. This was a contract with the state governments, with the federal government. The state said, you're never, ever to take guns away from our people. And the federal government said, no, 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 we'll never do this. Never. You have to know what these words mean. They didn't say also in this. Does it say in here? No, I don't see pistols only. I don't see rifles only. I don't see no cannons. You have a right to own the firearms of your choice. That right shall not be infringed. It's not about hunting. It's not about target practice. It's not even about rape or home defense. It is about an armed public being necessary to keep people free. An unarmed public is a tyrant's playground. The other thing you have to do besides educate yourself is you have to know who's on your side, who can defend you. I urge you to join the NRA. Please join the NRA. Also, get to know your sheriff. They are elected. They're not hired like policemen. I don't have a problem with policemen. I never have. But the sheriffs are different. They work for you. They're elected. And the job they are sworn to do is to solemnly support the Constitution of the United States of America. And thankfully, unlike the politicians, not all of them are violating their oath and trampling the Constitution in the process, just for the sake of votes. In fact, the sheriffs of this country are quite different than that. Many of them are putting it all on the line because they are doing what they were elected to do. We're going to talk to 4 of, I think, the bravest sheriffs in all of America. They represent 484 other sheriffs who are also as brave. They have banded together for our Second Amendment rights. They will not sit down. They will not be silenced. Not only must we listen to our sheriffs, get to know them, but then, if they're on the side of the Constitution, we must do everything in our power to support these sheriffs. We must stand with them and fight right alongside them and vow to do everything in our power to make sure that we are not the generation that let freedom slip through our fingertips. They are doing their part. Let me introduce you to the 4 gentlemen you'll be meeting here in a second. First one comes from Milwaukee, Sheriff David Clark. He isn't exactly the most conservative, or he isn't in the most conservative city in America. It doesn't help him to win votes in this city to stand in the way of a far-left agenda. Even though Clark is a Democrat, he has served 24 years with the Milwaukee Police Department. He's been at his post for a decade, but that hasn't stopped the smears after he suggested law-abiding citizens take personal responsibility with their own safety. Think of that. You're being smeared because you say you have to have personal responsibility and just consider owning a firearm. You remember this?
I'm Sheriff David Clark, and I want to talk to you about something personal, your safety. It's no longer a spectator sport. I need you in the game. But are you ready? With officers laid off and furloughed, simply calling 911 and waiting is no longer your best option. You can beg for mercy from a violent criminal, hide under the bed, or you can fight back. But are you prepared? Consider taking a certified safety course in handling a firearm so you can defend yourself until we get there. You have a duty to protect yourself and your family. We're partners now. Can I count on you?
How is that offensive? He's been under constant attack ever since, but he stood his ground. Then we have Sheriff Tim Mueller. He's been the sheriff of Linn County, Oregon since 2005. He's a highly decorated sheriff with numerous public safety awards, a volunteer firefighter, and he has put himself on the line when he posted a letter that he wrote to Vice President Biden that passionately announced he will not be enforcing unconstitutional gun control laws. He said, and I quote, "We are all Americans. We must not allow, nor shall we tolerate, the actions of criminals, no matter how heinous the crimes, to prompt politicians to enact laws that will infringe upon the liberties of responsible citizens who have broken no laws." The left has responded with accusations that it is the sheriff now who is the lawbreaker. He, too, has refused to buckle despite intense media pressure and despite the looming confrontation with the federal government. Then, next is Sheriff Glenn Palmer. He is the sheriff in Grant County, Oregon since 2001. He's taken a similar stand, an Air Force vet who takes his oath of protection of the people and the Constitution extremely seriously. He also wrote to Vice President Joe Biden stating, "I will not tolerate, nor will I permit any federal incursion within the exterior boundaries of Grant County, Oregon, where any type of gun control legislation aimed at disarming law-abiding citizens is the goal or objective." And finally, Sheriff Steve Cox, Livingston County, Missouri. Missouri's been in the news a lot. He's been a sheriff there since 2001. Extremely bright, graduated first in his class at the academy, former Missouri Sheriff of the Year, and he has decided to actually live out the oath and defend the Constitution from enemies foreign and domestic. He wrote to President Barack Obama stating any attempt to restrict the Second Amendment rights through executive order is, in my opinion, unconstitutional and tantamount to an all-out assault on the United States Constitution. Let me have you meet these sheriffs who represent so many more around our country. How you doing, guys?
Great. Good afternoon.
Let me start here, and let's go around the table. Why are you making a stand on this? Because that kind of language kind of sounds like we're headed towards an impasse as a nation.
Glenn, what I want to say is that we, as a nation, are facing some very difficult times right now. Our Constitution is very near and dear to me, and I believe that it's under attack, and it's still a living document, and it's still, as police officers, we still have to abide by the Constitution. The Constitution of the United States empowers the people. It does not empower the federal government. It prohibits them, it restricts them, and it prevents them from walking on top of the citizens that have elected me to office.
Okay. Sheriff?
Glenn, how are you?
Good, how are you?
I think you hit the nail right on the head in your opening there. You know, this is really about freedom and it's about liberty. Government doesn't get to say, I heard Joe Biden and I think the gentleman from New York talk about what people should do. We don't get to say how people can and should defend themselves. I trust law-abiding citizens, I always have, and government has to begin to learn to let go and start trusting citizens. I believe that personal security, personal safety is an individual responsibility. The citizens in Wisconsin, I can only speak for what's going on in Wisconsin, they've been empowered in the last couple of years. The legislature passed the Personal Protection Act, which allows people to apply and obtain a permit to go armed with a concealed weapon. And they also passed Castle Doctrine, which now flips the equation and allows a homeowner, in the event of an intruder, to use force up to and including deadly force to defend themselves and their family. And they don't have to explain before. They had to show that their actions were reasonable. Now the bad guy has to explain what he's doing in somebody else's house, something, you know, a location that's very sacred. And so, you know, with everything going on, I wanted to leverage those things and operationalize Castle Doctrine and the Personal Protection Act and remind people, because I believe in giving people choices, as my ad does. And like I said, if they want to hide under the bed, fine. I don't really care what people do, but it's not for me to say. And my job is just to give people some things to think about ahead of time, because when I like to use this phrase, when the wolf's at the door, it's a little too late to, you know, try to get your act together.
Do you believe the Constitution's under attack?
Oh, without a doubt. Without a doubt. And, you know, the Constitution means a lot to me, not just because of the oath that I took. And you know, as a black man, you know, our freedom came a little later than the Founding Fathers did, but it came nonetheless. And it came at a heavy price. And I'm not going to cede 1 ounce of my freedom and my liberty, or yours, or your family's, back to the government, whether it be the federal government or the state government or to anybody else. And so I'm going to defend this thing tooth and nail.
Steve?
Thank you. I think I told your staff before, where does it start and where does it stop? If Washington's going to take away part of the Second Amendment, what's next? Is it the 1st, 4th, 14th? Where does it end? As law enforcement and as elected officials, we have an oath to uphold the Constitution of the United States and, for me, the state of Missouri. You know, what I'm seeing and hearing in the media nowadays scares the heck out of me. If we just do nothing, if we stand by and, you know, somebody will take care of it, the people we elected in Washington will set it aside or correct it or whatever, that's wrong. I've always been one person that not to attract attention to myself, but I think we have to put our foot down whenever we see something that's wrong. We have to make a stand. Sometimes if you lead, you may stand alone.
And?
Well, sometimes you do kind of feel like you're alone. You know, but, you know, I'm sitting here with 3 other sheriffs, and when it comes to defending that Constitution, and because we're all sworn not to only support the Constitution of the United States, but also our own states, but when it's under attack, like it is, if not us, then who is going to defend it? And it looks like
this will put you guys in jeopardy, because you have many police officers. You have the police chief in Los Angeles. You have them all over saying really pretty much the opposite of what you're saying. You know, a lot of them are saying you don't have a right. You just don't have a right to have it. We can, you know, the police can go and grab your guns. If the president signs an executive order, they can do that. So then what happens? What do you guys do? President signs an executive order. What is that? What do you do?
Where's the due process? Let me say this, and I don't have problems with municipal agencies, state agencies, or anything else, but a long time ago there was a guy wanting to kill himself in our county, and I took the call and dealt with it. I went up speaking with him on the cell phone, found out where he was at, And at first, I told him who I was. He's like, I don't know if I want to talk to you. I'm like, why not? He said, because I don't trust the cops. And I said, I don't either. That's why I'm a sheriff. And he laughed. And I knew if he was going to laugh, he wasn't probably intent on killing himself. So we talked, and even to this day, he'll make his way up to come and talk to me and thank me for taking that time. But guns don't kill people. It's the people that do that. No different than driving a car, using a blunt object, whatever it is.
But you notice how they framed this thing, and you talked about it. They realize, when I say they, those anti-gun people, those anti-Second Amendment people on the left, they know that the phrase gun control doesn't play well in this country because it is a fundamental freedom. I've had people tell me over the last 2 or 3 weeks since my ad came out, which was meant to just be a local ad, I was talking to my constituents, they said, I don't even own guns, but I get what you're saying. And they see that as a slippery slope. For even people who don't own guns, they understand this is not just about guns. And as my colleague over here said, because I view the Second Amendment as sacred as the First. I really do. I think they go hand in hand, and I think he mentioned as well the Fourth Amendment, the Fifth Amendment, these protections, but they've shifted this language from gun control to reducing gun violence, and that's not what this is about, okay? Because the weapons that they're talking about are not the weapons of choice, at least in my county, for the thugs on the street who are committing this mayhem on a daily basis. They're not buying their ammo over the internet. They're not using large capacity magazines. They're not using these so-called assault rifles, and they're not concerned about background checks. So you can see, and I've seen right through it, and I think most people have, you can see right through what they're trying to do here. But I think it's a slippery slope. I think it's dangerous. And I was elected, and our state constitution says the sheriff is accountable to the sovereign, the voters of the county. I am not accountable to Washington, D.C. I am not accountable to the White House. I'm not even accountable to Madison, Wisconsin, which is where our capital and the state legislature is. I'm accountable to the people of Milwaukee County. They'll make a determination as to what should happen.
I have to take a quick break, but I have heard from several people that they believe the sheriffs in the country really are the only ones standing in the way of, a tyrant, no matter who, at what time or when in the country's history. But the sheriffs are the only ones that are really kind of out of the system and answer directly to the people and to the Constitution, where everybody else is kind of in this system. Would you agree with that?
Well, we're the only elected law enforcement officers in the country.
Right.
Last voice people have.
Even with some of the publication that the federal government puts out, in their own words, they say that the sheriff is the chief law enforcement officer of the county, and they shouldn't be doing anything within the counties without first touching bases with their sheriff.
Okay, back in a minute.
We need to be the founding fathers on how to deal with the sickness in our country called gun violence. Hiding behind the Second Amendment doesn't cut it anymore. Hiding behind the Second Amendment can no longer be the shield for access. The people who wrote that document owned slaves, oppressed women, and were short on tolerance.
Do you know how much money these people have made over the slaughter of 20 innocents in Newtown? Do you know how much richer these rich gun manufacturers have gotten over the past month?
Or a rational person could say that having access to a high-powered semi-automatic rifle is inappropriate, that there's no reason to go deer hunting with that. There's no reason to have access to that.
We need to get guns and bullets and automatic weapons off the streets. They should only be available to police officers and to hunt Al-Qaeda and the Taliban.
Any of you guys believe in any of that?
No, absolutely
It's ridiculous.
not.
What do you say to somebody who, like the vice president was just on, I think trying to seem reasonable, to me he sounded insane, telling his wife, just go outside and fire a couple of rounds off of your shotgun, your double-barrel shotgun. What do you say to people? What do you need? And what do I need a semi-automatic assault rifle for?
That would be a personal choice. Every American has a personal choice whether they want to have a handgun, a shotgun, or a rifle, and the amount of ammunition that is held in each one of those magazines is not up to anybody that works in law enforcement or in the government has any business telling.
As long as I'm not a lawbreaker.
Correct.
Exactly.
If I'm a lawbreaker, then
You bet.
do you guys believe that that, for instance, in Colorado, the gunman that came into the movie theater, there was another one that was bigger and closer to him, but it didn't ban concealed carry. The theater where he opened fire, that did ban concealed carry. Do you believe that that people who are carrying guns in a situation like that are a help or a hindrance to the situation?
I can tell you if there would have been a responsible concealed handgun license holder in that theater, that probably would have turned out entirely different.
There was a situation in Milwaukee several summers ago, the Mayor Tom Barrett, and he's one of the leaders of this Mayors Against Guns group that we're hearing about. And he walks around with an armed security staff, and he should. He's the mayor, taxpayer-supported police officers. But he stepped outside that bubble, and he intervened in a domestic dispute on the street several summers ago. And this guy took a tire iron and beat him within inches of his life. And he found out how 911 wasn't available as he's getting thumped by this tire iron wielding suspect. And I would like to think after that he'd have a different view of this, and he would be able to see how everyday Americans, the threats they have to put up with and what they have to live with, and he'd be a little more sensitive to their plight of self-defense, but he's not.
Don't you think that, I mean, here we are sitting in a place where police officers, you know, the president yesterday was out with police officers behind him. I've never seen police officers' budgets in the federal budget, but he's saying that if the way things are going, we're going to have to cut all these police officers. And some towns are. Cherry Hill, New Jersey, they got rid of the police department. Isn't it irresponsible to not deliver the message that you delivered, that's saying, hey, guys, police are not going to be able to get there? What is your response time?
Well, 12 minutes in my county. It's a 2,300 square mile county, and Glenn and I both are from Oregon, and that state is in bad shape because it's a logging state, timber. Mm-hmm. And well, then the spotted owl was put on a protected species list, and now the timber payments are running out, and law enforcement agencies and sheriff's offices all around Oregon are just drying up. One of the biggest counties on the western side of the state.
So isn't it responsible to be able to say to your people, you should be able to defend yourself, because it's going to be a while before we get there?
Absolutely.
They have absolutely every right to defend themselves. We are not going to be there at the beck and call of people, and they have an absolute right to defend themselves or a third person.
Your state scares me, Missouri, because there's been a few things that have happened in Missouri that are, you know, right when this president came in, all of a sudden there was this Missouri state, I don't remember what it was, but it was this thing that said if you have a Ron Paul bumper sticker, or if you're a member of the Tea Party, you know, you might be a member of militia and you might be dangerous. Then there was another thing that came out just a couple of weeks ago while you guys were debating, and I know your governor stepped in. How's the health of Missouri? What's going on in your state?
It depends on where you're at, I guess. Chillicothe's where I'm from, born and raised. I haven't had one negative comment on my letter to the president or my stand on the Second Amendment. Our whole community, I mean, people that were raised there, we all hunt and fish. If you don't have a gun, you're probably one of the minority. You go to Kansas City or St. Louis someplace, it's probably a little different story. We had a deal at one of our rural schools recently. Situation probably got blown out of proportion before we got there, but a deputy checked the parking lot, saw a gun in one of the students' vehicles. Safe Schools Act violation. Before I could, I mean, just in a matter of minutes, one of the Kansas City news stations was calling me on my cell phone, going crazy about this. Thinking it was tied to the incident we were investigating, and it wasn't. It was a nice kid, a rural kid, that had probably went rabbit hunting over the weekend and forgot to take his gun in the house. And you could go down there probably any day of the week and see the same problem. You know, and I mean, the news reporter finally said, so let me guess, let me get this. If this was in Kansas City, it'd probably be a lot bigger deal.
Yeah.
Probably so. Here, you got to look on, person had no motivation to do anything, no opportunity, anything else. But I mean, it was just crazy. It was blown way out of proportion.
Okay, when we come back, I want to ask you guys what we as citizens can do to help support you. Because the average person knows what's going on, fears what's going on, and doesn't know exactly who to trust and how to help the people like you guys who are standing on the front line. Back in a minute. I want to bring somebody else to the table here, and then we're going to get to some solutions. But John Lott is just one of the best guys on the stats of guns and gun control and the history of where it's been and where it's going. He's also the author of a new book called "At the Brink: Will Obama Push Us Over the Edge?" And full disclosure, he is also helping a new book that's coming out in, I don't know, 3 months called Control, on gun control. He's helping us write that. John, before we get to some solutions, tell me what's happening in Colorado, because we spoke about this earlier today, and I think no one has really put this together.
Right. Well, I was just in Colorado over the weekend. Some legislators had invited me out to talk to them, and the Obama administration's putting on a real push. It's the first time I've heard of where a sitting administration in Washington is calling up individual state legislators on a state issues and trying to twist their arms to vote for gun control. In this case, the president's promising to come out and help campaign for them in the next election if they have trouble. And they were able to get 7 Democrats to switch their votes from originally being against the gun control laws, and they would have been defeated, to making so they passed the state house there.
Okay. Why?
Well, what the vice president told people when he talked to them was that they want to pass it in Colorado, and if they can show that they can pass certain rules in a relatively gun-friendly state such as Colorado, then they can use it to help push for the laws that Obama's trying to push nationally.
You think they get it through? Do you think this happens?
I think they have a good chance to get a couple things through nationally. They're talking about these magazine limits, and they're also talking about these universal background checks. I don't think the assault weapons ban is going to go anyplace.
You think I'm wrong on comparing their end goal to that of what happened in England?
Well, I think that's farther down the road, possibly. I used to know Obama. We both taught at the University of Chicago Law School together. The first time I met him, I went up and I introduced myself, and he said, "Oh, you're the gun guy." And I said, "I guess so." And he turned to me and he said, "I don't believe people should be able to own guns." And I said, "Well, maybe we can get together for lunch or something and talk about it sometime." And he just kind of wrinkled his face, turned around and walked away, and that was the end of our first discussion.
No, but since then he goes out skeet shooting all the time.
Right. Well, people can change after a while, I guess.
Right. I don't think he has.
I don't think he has either.
He's changed his words, but he hasn't changed his opinion. All right. Let me come back to the sheriffs here. What is it that, if I'm watching TV, and I don't live in one of your counties, but I live in a county with a sheriff, obviously, what do I, A, ask them to find out their position and know that they're telling me the truth, and B, what do I do to support them? Anybody?
Well, for one, it's pretty easy, well, at least in my county, to get a hold of me as the sheriff. I mean, it's been kind of busy here lately since I sent that letter out, obviously, but most of the time I'll either get right back with you or take your call, or if somebody just stops in. That's what people need to do, is contact their sheriff. The sheriff is their elected law enforcement leader of their county, and they have every right to come and talk to their sheriff to find out what his or her position is.
How can we support? How can we help you?
One thing we all have in common, we're elected. I think most of us just came out of an election, and we're elected every 4 years. Other than that, support our cause. We've given away thousands of free gun locks. try and put on programs for kids and things like that. In Missouri, at least, the counties are probably the poorest entity, and the sheriffs have the fewest dollars to spend with their public.
You know, the blowback has been tremendous in my county, and
I bet it has.
We have to. The counter strategy to the left on this issue is we have to let them know that we know this is a fight, and we're going to fight with the ferociousness of a junkyard dog to maintain our liberty and to maintain our freedom generally. And this is not just about the Second Amendment. So I need to hear from folks, because I don't have the army that the left has. And they try to wear you down, they try to silence you. I've heard from people all across this great nation after that 30-second little ad. And I tell people, call your legislature, call your legislators, call your governors, call everybody you can, and stay active. This is not passive anymore, and it's not going to go away. The left sees this as a tremendous opportunity, and they're not likely to let it go lightly. So forget about the passiveness now, and well, I'll vote on election day. It's got to be beyond that now. But you got to make your voice heard, not just to me, but to everybody.
I'm pretty sure I know that the people within my county know where I stand. Being a gun owner myself, born and raised in Eastern Oregon, hunted since my early childhood years. I don't think there's any question with the constituents that support me as their sheriff where I stand. We have a very close-knit community. We have 4-H, we have fast draw competitions, we have skeet shooting, we have black powder cartridge shoots.
So you're not, nobody's moving into your county.
You know what, the sad thing is we still have people that misuse firearms. And trying to get those people to quit doing what they're doing is one of the things that I would like to see. And gun owners need to police their own ranks. And what I mean by that is using them to commit acts of vandalism and shooting insulators off the telephone poles and shooting road signs as you're driving down the road. It doesn't do anything to the gun owners except bring heat on them. And it gives the anti-gun people ammunition to come after us. And, you know, as far as I know, we're still Americans. We're still citizens of the United States. I'm a citizen of the state of Oregon. Our constitutions, they don't permit us to have a gun. It is our right to have a gun.
Right.
And I don't want to antagonize anybody or set anybody off to go do something or to take some kind of a hostile action toward any government official. That is not my goal. That's a furthest from that. I believe in keeping all the federal employees or state employees safe is very important. But when I see things within my community, people are tired of the oppression from their government. And at some point, it's got to stop, or we're going to have problems.
John, you, as the gun guy, as Obama called you, you ever seen it? Have you? Because I never have. I've never lived at a time like this where I've heard what you said is true. What you just said is true. People are tired of it, and pretty soon it's got to stop.
Well, it looks like a lot could happen right now. I suppose the late 90s was maybe a similar time. You know, 98, 99, there was a lot of pressure back then. I just want to say, my research, if it shows me anything, it shows the police are the single most important factor for reducing crime. I have no doubt about that. I've found that consistently if any of you have read my books. But I think, you know, the police themselves understand. You almost always arrive on the crime scene after the crime's been committed. It's kind of like your ad, almost exactly that you had there. And the question is, what should people do when they're by themselves and the police aren't there? And what's missed out in so much of this debate that we have is that people talk about the benefits from some law, but they never talk about the possible costs that are there in terms of, you know, we all want to try to keep guns away from criminals. But, you know, you just take kind of the simplest example where you can go and ban guns. Well, that seems like an obvious way to get guns away from criminals. But what happens then? It's every place in the world that we have crime data, both before and after a ban, murder rates go up. I cannot find one place in the world where there's been a gun ban and murder rates have gone down. And the simple reason is that it's the law-abiding good citizens who obey these bans and not the criminals. And it's just not something as simple as a ban. You have many other types of regulations that are there that And you have to be careful when we pass these types of things, who is going to be most affected. And because otherwise you often will unintentionally. So Massachusetts, just looking at some data, they passed registration. You know, you mentioned maybe the end game. They passed registration in 1998. The number of legal gun owners in Massachusetts has gone from 1.5 million to 200,000 since then. Massachusetts has been one of the few places in the country that's seen increases in murder rates and violent crime since then. If you compare it to their neighbors, Massachusetts' murder rate was 70% of the level of its neighbors in 1998. Now it's 125% of the level of its neighbors. And you can see the increase that occurred right when they started taking guns away from people.
Okay. Gentlemen, thank you very much. I want to spend a couple of minutes with you, John, on the back half. We just have a couple of minutes left, and I want to talk to you about, will he push us over the edge? Because it's not just guns. We'll do that next. John Lott is going to spend the last couple of minutes with us. His book is called At the Brink. And this one covers, because it's not just gun control, it's everything that this president has done to us, and not just this president, but this whole progressive movement. It's been a shocking 4 years. The president is currently talking about sequestration, and that's why he had the cops behind him. And what I can't connect is, he says we're going to have to cut cops, which aren't in the federal budget. We're going to have to cut cops if sequestration goes through. Yet, we're not going to have cops, but you have to have your gun taken away. And at the same time, that hypocrisy, the hypocrisy of him saying, this is going to kill us if it goes through, yet it was his idea, it was his bill.
No, I mean, this is a guy who, when he ran in 2008, promised to make government smaller. He promised that the stimulus would only be 1 or 2 years. And now 5 years into his administration, we can't even slow the rate of growth. I mean, this is $85 billion out of a $3.8 trillion budget. And, you know, this is after we've had the biggest increases in inflation-adjusted spending in our nation's history.
We just spent $60 billion for Hurricane Sandy.
Right. This was an additional $60 billion that we just added to the original budget.
Right. And now this is going to kill us. This is going to push us over the edge. And the Republicans are playing right in on it.
Well, I mean, it's such an easy thing to respond to. I have some amazing graphs in the book that just show, if you look around the world, the countries that have done the policies that Obama wants, more spending, more deficit, they're the ones that are hurting right now in terms of growth and in terms of employment. And, you know, it's the countries that are doing the, quote, austerity. They're the ones that are growing the most. There's some countries that have done fairly well the last few years.
We talked on the radio today. I mean, you had some fascinating stuff on Medicare, you know, or Obamacare, and you said you don't think we survive. We don't come out the same way.
Oh yeah, we've had the best healthcare industry in the world. I mean, I think on the economics, there's still things that can be done to save things, but Obama's going to be there for 4 years. We have to accept he's not going to allow bills through to change it. We've decimated the pharmaceutical industry in this country. New drugs that would have come out now aren't going to be there to go and save lives, and it's going to affect not just the United States, but it's going to affect the world. You look at the prices of insurance, just over the last 12 months, the cost of private health insurance has gone up by over 14%. You know, and the rules that we have coming into effect next January are going to have an explosion at that time. And, you know, hardly what he was promising in there. But the big changes, the collapse of private insurance, I think is going to begin this next year with the new rules.
I know you don't want to say it, or you wouldn't have phrased it as a question here at the bottom. Will Obama push us over the edge? Yes. Yes, I think he will. But it remains to be seen. John Lott, thank you very much.
Oh, thank you.
At the Brink, available in bookstores everywhere. Back in a minute. If we would have named Man in the Moon something else, we would have named it Restoring Independence. Tickets are still available. You can just go to the website there and grab your tickets. From Dallas, good night, America.